The atmosphere in the Imperial Hotel hall was one of luxury and pretended joy. Huge crystal chandeliers sparkled above the guests' heads, their light reflected in glasses of champagne. Waiters rushed about the hall in spotless white gloves. Soft jazz played in the background, and the laughter of the wealthy drowned out everything else. Against all this splendor, she looked out of place, a fragile girl in a simple black dress, her hair neatly tied up, her eyes weary. Her name was Lena. That evening she worked without rest. A tray with glasses, then plates, then new orders. Sweat gathered on her forehead, but she didn't dare stop. The manager was watching her every step. Everything might have gone smoothly if not for one careless movement. As she passed between the tables, someone suddenly pushed back a chair. Lena stumbled, the glass slipped from her hand, and red wine spread like a scarlet stain across a man's white suit. The man sitting at the head table. Silence. All eyes turned toward her. "Do you even realize what you've done?" the man said coldly. It was Artyom Volkov, a millionaire, the owner of a hotel chain, a handsome man with an icy smile and a habit of looking down on everyone. Lena turned pale, her heart pounding wildly. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to," she whispered, trying to pick up the broken glass from the floor. Artyom slowly stood up. His white jacket was ruined by the red blotch. He wiped his sleeve with a napkin and smirked. "This suit costs more than you make in a year." A quiet chuckle rippled through the hall. The guests were already anticipating a show. "I can pay for it, from my salary," Lena murmured, not daring to lift her eyes. "From your salary?" he laughed. "You wouldn't make enough in 10 years. He stepped closer, his voice lower but sharper. "They say you used to dance, didn't you?" She looked up in surprise. "Yes, back in school. But that was long ago." He leaned toward her with a smirk. "Then here's the deal. If you dance tango right here, I might forgive you." Laughter swept through the hall. "Tango here among the guests? Poor girl, she'd die of shame." Artyom turned theatrically toward the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, if this girl dances the tango, I'll marry her." The laughter grew louder. Some even clapped. "Marry her? Ah, let's see her try." Lena couldn't breathe. She stood in the middle of the hall, surrounded by the wealthy crowd, feeling small and helpless. Her heart was beating in her throat. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor, anything not to see those mocking faces. But then something inside her snapped. The tears of humiliation froze deep within, replaced by something else: silence. Determination. She straightened up, slowly untied her white apron, placed the tray on the table and said softly but firmly, "All right." The laughter stopped. Artyom raised an eyebrow in surprise. "You're serious?" She nodded. "I'll dance. Just don't laugh." The music changed. The violinist, as if sensing the moment, began to play the first chords of a tango. Lena took her first step. Uncertainly, carefully. But then, a second step, a third. Every movement was filled with feeling. The crowd watched, holding its breath. She danced without a partner, alone, yet as if life itself were dancing beside her, defiant and alive. At first her movements were soft, almost timid, but with each turn she seemed to shed all the humiliation, all the pain, all the fear. Her body moved to the rhythm of her heart, free, bright, passionate. A flicker of astonishment appeared in Artyom's eyes. He no longer saw a simple waitress. Before him stood a woman burning with inner fire. Her gaze had become firm and every step seemed to say, "You wanted to humiliate me, but I'll show you who I am." When the music reached its peak, she spun around, spreading her arms like wings. The hall froze. Even the laughter disappeared. Even Artyom, who had seen the best dancers in the world, could not move. She finished the dance with a graceful step forward and stopped right in front of him. Looked straight into his eyes. Not frightened. "Come. Steady. Are you satisfied now?" she asked quietly. His lips trembled, but no words came. All the guests stared at her, stunned, astonished. And only at that moment did everyone understand. What had begun as mockery had turned into triumph. Lena bowed, picked up her apron from the floor, and calmly walked toward the exit. Not a single word, not a single tear, only silence behind her. When the door closed after her, the hall seemed to wake up. Someone awkwardly tried to start clapping, but no one joined in. Shame hung in the air. Artyom remained standing alone. The scarlet stain of wine still marked his suit, but now it looked different, like the mark of defeat. He remembered how he had mocked her, how the crowd had laughed with him, and suddenly realized that the girl he had wanted to humiliate had turned out to be stronger than all of them combined. He approached the table, poured himself a glass of champagne, but couldn't take a sip. His throat tightened. For the first time in years he felt ashamed. Outside, Lena stepped into the cold night air. Her hands trembled, her breathing was uneven. She leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, and only then allowed herself to cry. But these were not tears of pain. They were tears of freedom. She had danced for the first time in many years, and for the first time not for an audience, not for praise, not for victory. She danced for herself. Streetlights glowed softly. Snow fell onto her hair and melted on her eyelashes. She smiled. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered, looking up at the sky. "I remembered who I am again." Passers-by turned to look at her, a young woman with shining eyes and a light step, as if she carried invisible wings behind her back. Meanwhile, inside the Imperial Hall, the guests were leaving in silence. No one joked or laughed anymore. Not even Artyom stopped at the door. He just stood by the window watching the street where her shadow disappeared. Only one thought kept echoing in his head: "If you dance the tango, I'll marry you." He realized he had said it as a joke, but now those words sounded like a vow he was unworthy of. He knew he would never see her the same way again, not humiliated, not frightened. From now on he would remember her forever, in the dance, free and proud. When one of the guests hesitantly asked, "Well, Artyom, what did you think of her tango?" he replied hoarsely, lowering his gaze. "It wasn't a dance. It was a blow of fate." The music had faded, the lights had dimmed, and in the silence, only the echo of her footsteps remained, light, confident, real. That evening the waitress named Lena lost her job, but regained her soul. And the millionaire, Artyom Volkov, lost for the first time. Not in business but in life. 3 months passed. Winter was leaving behind gray streets and puddles of melting snow. The world seemed colder. Or perhaps it was just Artyom Volkov who felt like a stranger in the city where once everyone knew his name. Once, he had been the master of life. Expensive suits, luxury cars, meetings with ministers, dinners with the most powerful people in the capital. But now his name was associated not with success, but with downfall. Partners had betrayed him, accounts were frozen, the company bought out by competitors. The newspapers screamed with headlines, "Volkov Empire collapses." The hotel king was left with nothing. For the first time in many years, Artyom walked on foot. No driver, no bodyguards, no suit. Just an old coat with a turned-down collar. People passed by without recognizing him. In the evening, as he walked down the street, he noticed a poster. On it were the words, "Charity Evening, Tango of the Soul. Choreography by Lena Morozova." He stopped, and the name struck his heart like a knife. Lena. He stood there for a long time, staring at the poster, and then, almost without realizing it, walked inside. The hall was nothing like the one where he had once mocked her. No crystal chandeliers, no gold. Just simple wooden walls, rows of chairs, and dozens of children, small, thin, with bright eyes. They laughed, ran around, helped the performers. It was an evening organized for orphans and children from shelters. He sat in the very back row, trying not to draw attention. When the music began, the stage lit up softly, and she appeared. Lena. The same waitress he had once forced to dance for his amusement. But now she was different, not timid, not lost. In a light dress, with her head held high, she began to dance, and the hall fell silent. It was the same tango but entirely different. Then she had danced out of pain. Now she danced out of strength. Every movement was filled with confidence, tenderness, and light. She wasn't just dancing, she was living. Children danced beside her, clumsy, small, but happy. She held their hands, smiled, helped each one take a step. The dance that had once been a symbol of humiliation had now become a symbol of hope. Artyom felt something tighten in his chest. He watched without blinking, afraid that if he looked away, it would all vanish. When the dance ended, the hall erupted in applause. The children shouted, clapped. Some even ran onto the stage to hug Lena. She laughed and hugged them back. Her eyes shone with joy. And in that moment he understood she had won. After the performance, he stood by the exit for a long time, unsure whether to approach her. She noticed him first. "Artyom Volkov," she said calmly without surprise. "It's been a while." He gave a nervous smile. "Lena, you're completely different." "No," she replied gently. "I just remembered who I am." He lowered his eyes. "I was a fool back then. I wanted to humiliate you to laugh, but in the end I humiliated myself." She said nothing. There was no anger in her eyes, only a quiet sadness. "You once said," she continued after a pause, "if I danced the tango you'd marry me. Remember?" He nodded. "I remember. And now I would marry you without conditions. Just because you're the kind of woman I wish I could admire." She smiled, but there was no promise in that smile. "Artyom, I'm already married." He flinched. "What?" She nodded toward the stage where the children were once again trying to copy her movements. "To them. To my dream. To life. I'm married to what gives me meaning." He stood silent for a long moment, then whispered, "You changed my understanding of strength." "No," she said softly. "You just saw real strength for the first time. It's not in money or power, it's in the ability to forgive." She opened her purse and took out a small ticket. "This is an invitation to my next performance. Come, if you want to see what freedom looks like." He took the ticket with trembling fingers. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, thank yourself. You can still start over. Not from zero, but from the place where you lost your conscience." Those words hit harder than any accusation. He wanted to say something, but she was already walking toward the children, surrounded by laughter and love. Artyom stepped outside. The sky was dark, but the stars shone brightly. He stood in the rain looking down at the ticket in his hand. On it were the words, "Tango of the Soul. Admission free." He smiled. Free. Yes, now he finally understood that word. A few weeks later, a short television report aired about a charity center where underprivileged children were learning to dance. The reporter smiled. "The school is run by a former waitress, now a renowned choreographer, Lena Morozova. Her past wasn't easy, but it taught her how to believe." The camera showed Lena among the children. She was holding the hand of a little girl on crutches, helping her take a step. And outside in the shadows beyond the door, stood a man in a simple coat watching them dance. He didn't go in. He just stood there listening to the music, whispering quietly, "Thank you, Lena." He understood, they belonged to different worlds now. But deep inside he knew, her tango had changed his life forever. Years later, Artyom opened a small school, not of business but of honesty. He helped former prisoners, the homeless, and those who had lost faith to find themselves again. On the wall by the entrance hung a photograph, a woman in the middle of a dance. The caption read, "If you ever fall, remember how she danced." And whenever someone asked who she was, Artyom would reply, "She's the person who once made me see that tango can be a prayer." He no longer wore expensive suits. He didn't like to talk about the past. But every evening he would play that same melody. Sometimes he would just listen. And sometimes he would try to repeat the steps, clumsy, slow but sincere. One evening he received a letter with no signature. Inside was a ticket. On it were the words, "Tango of the Soul. Final performance. Come, old friend." He went. When the music began he saw her again. Lena danced alone. The same lightness, the same glow. But now her movements were gentler, calmer, like a farewell. At the end of the dance she looked straight into the audience. Their eyes met. She smiled and nodded. Artyom stood up. People turned toward him. Someone whispered, "That's the millionaire she once humiliated." "No," someone else said quietly. "That's the man who finally understood what love is." When the concert ended he approached the stage. Lena stood in the dim light, tired but happy. "So you came," she said softly. "Of course." I had to see how our dance ends. Our dance doesn't end, Artyom, she said. It just changes the music. She reached out her hand. He took it, and for the first time in many years, he felt no shame. Only gratitude. The final melody began to play. They danced slowly, quietly, without words. Not for the audience, for forgiveness. And when the lights went out, the hall stood in silence. No one clapped. No one spoke. Because the ending had taken everyone's breath away. She left. And he remained standing alone on the stage, staring into the empty hall. Tears and a smile on his face. He understood then, wealth can be lost, power can be taken. But true strength is the ability to keep dancing. Even when life has knocked you to the ground. The music faded, but deep inside his heart, one phrase still echoed. If you dance the tango, I'll marry you. Now he knew, it was never a promise. It was destiny. A destiny that taught him how to love, forgive, and live again.